a lot to get to, including a surprise firing across the NFL. But we start with college football, and we will get to Pat McAfee, Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Kimmel, ESPN, and much more. Chad, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Hutton. The hero that everyone wished for all year, the Michigan Wolverines. One of those
America's
underdog
team.
stories that everyone roots for. Nothing at all to see here. Bootstraps type guys. And they went back out there and they did it after promising that's what they were going to do with all those guys coming back this year. Congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines. Absolutely nothing else to talk about other than this team going 15-0 and winning a national championship. Congrats to Jim Harbaugh and his Michigan Wolverines, Hutton.
They were treated like America's team last night, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the game itself, sloppy. But I believe that really good teams can make solid teams look really bad. Michigan should have been up big at halftime. They were not.
Washington very fortunate to be down 17-10 at halftime.
They had, 4 possessions in the second half to tie the game. Could not do it. Michael Penix Jr. picked the wrong time to have his worst performance of the season. And even then, they're still in the game. Michigan could not take advantage. But when it counted, they did. Their defense was solid, been solid all season, and they end up covering towards the end of the game there. So here's what I'm thinking, Chad, as the confetti's falling, and the conversation is more about, there's Jim Harbaugh with his father, with John, his brother, and the conversation isn't about what the saga was all season long. We have discussed quite a bit about how this Michigan team will be remembered. The sign-stealing scandal, unbeaten season. Harbaugh suspended 6 games combined, 3 to begin, 3 to end the regular season. I mean, I came to the conclusion last night, I'm going to remember them as champions. Because while they may vacate wins a couple of years from now, that moment absolutely happened last night, and it was allowed to happen thanks to the NCAA and the Infractions Committee for not acting. Now, they've got certain guidelines they're going to follow, but the College Football Playoff Committee put Michigan number 1. They cashed those checks. Combined, they'll split revenue of $500 million, the teams from the Power 5. The Big Ten stepped in on a sportsmanship violation, while the NCAA, they can't even type up the notice of allegations. We need a commissioner of college football because what we just watched, whether you care about sign stealing, whether you don't, what we just watched is a football program, a coach, and a university dare the governing body to prove it. And the head coach is proclaiming innocence for the entire program at the postgame presser. So what do we learn here? There is power, and then there is the appearance of power. And Harbaugh has it. So much so that if he was in on the stallion, the sign-stealing saga and the mission to go out and do this, actively cheat and be brazen about it, he has so much power that no one, absolutely no one, has thrown him under the bus, past, present, or anyone that has been kept out of a job or kicked out because someone else took their spot. Even Stalions himself took the fall, solo. We haven't heard from the linebackers coach. It's been Stalions as the face of this incident. And then Michigan offers him a 10-year, $125 million contract that's been on the table for months. Meanwhile, contrast that with the coaches that were involved publicly with this. Guess what Ryan Day will enter the season with next year? The hot seat tag. Nothing changes for his job status. The Big Ten is going to sell their national championship and their runner-up. Sharon Moore, who absolutely knew what Stalions was up to. He's on the sideline standing right next to the dude. He's going to be the next head coach of the Michigan Wolverines whenever we see Harbaugh jump to the NFL. And then there's the NCAA. They are more or less representing the figurehead status, like the royal family. Everyone can be livid and get after Harbaugh, but, I mean, you could be pissed off at Michigan or the Michigan man. But just remember the college football playoff of the NCAA they stood back and had Tony Petitti do the work for them. The team that was representing the entire sport as the best in college football, Michigan, was the entire saga and storyline off the field for a blatant rules violation. The news from this Yahoo Sports report broke on October 19th. Stallions on the Central Michigan sideline at Michigan State, that was October 31st. And January 8th, Harbaugh is on the stage accepting the national championship trophy on behalf of Michigan. And he's looked upon as the best in the sport at the moment. And he's looked upon as the best candidate for the National Football League job openings. I mean, what are we doing here? All of this talk and controversy and rules violations and did you cheat, did you not? What difference does it make? Because if you make it there, the NCAA is going to crown you, and the broadcast is not going to mention anything about it. And you sit back and, well, they'll get your photo op. They'll have the Harbaughs together for the trio of champions. Even if all season long we've been talking about what the NCAA will do years from now, Chad. Years from now. Not now. Not whenever you can actually punish those involved. Years from now. And by then, we'll look upon this like we do Kansas in the basketball program, where Bill Self wasn't punished and no one really cared because it happened so long ago that no one really cares. That's where we are with this.
I thought about a lot watching last night, Hutton. Well said by you with that. And one thing I thought about was Connor Stalions' Michigan football fan. And what I mean by this is Connor Stalions was a guy who set out to win with Michigan football at all costs. He had, I don't know how many files on him, but all these different plans of what he was going to do to get an advantage for his beloved Michigan Wolverines to make them a national championship winning program. I'm looking into the future now, and I'm seeing the 30 for 30 or the Netflix documentary about Connor Stalions and this sign-stealing scandal years from now. And I can see the director in the end of it. We can barely hear the director in the back say, well, was it all worth it? And I can see Connor Stalions with a wry smile looking into the camera saying, was it worth it? Damn right it was worth it. And that's how it cuts to credits and ends the documentary. And I think you could ask that same question to Jim Harbaugh, to Sharon Moore, to J.J. McCarthy, to Blake Corum, to every Michigan player, coach, every Michigan fan out there. And they would all have the same answer with all of this. Well, was it worth it? Damn right it was worth it. That's how Michigan fans would have gone about it. This is something that countless Michigan Wolverines fans, this is college football as a separating factor from a crazy fan base standpoint. They would have done that. If you would have told how many Michigan fans, you can go put on Central Michigan gear and go illegally scout signs, if you're good at doing things like this, decode them, bring them back to us, and help us over the course of a year and a half or 2 years, help us build to a roster and a team that is eventually going to go 15-0 and win a national championship in Houston, Texas, with maize and blue confetti raining from the rafters of NRG Stadium, and all of us basking in the glory of the first unanimous, undisputed national championship for Michigan football since 1948. How many Michigan fans would sign up for that? I would say a bunch of them.
Every one of them.
And I'm watching this game last night, Hutton, with a lot of conflicting emotion, starting with the open, which ESPN, for their faults, they do a great job with the open of that. John Williams, the score that he has for the national championship game, that's specifically composed for the national championship game, terrific. Going back to Tony Dorsett, Tommy Frazier, Tim Tebow, Vince Young, talking about their national championship moments, powerful. I love the build-up and the lead-in to the game. And I understand why when you're covering a championship, it's not a game, it's an event. Mm-hmm. It's an all-day-long build-up for that moment, why you don't want to spend any time harping on scandal, controversy, NCAA investigation. I understand all of this, but I'm watching this game, watching the Michigan players, even watching Jim Harbaugh in that likable moment with John when he surprises them on the sideline and they embrace. Watching all this, and I'm thinking, man, This is a likable group. This should be a really good story. I should feel really, really strong and really good about this. All these emotions I'm having right now watching this game and watching Michigan win a national title, I shouldn't be conflicted with those emotions. But I can't help it. I'm conflicted today. Watching the celebration for Michigan, knowing what went on in the build-up to this, watching all of it. I don't know that McCarthy and Corum and Donovan Edwards and all of those great players, Junior Colson, the list goes on and on. I don't know what those guys knew. I know they knew that they had the other team's signs. I don't know if they knew how Connor Stallions was getting them. Don't know. There's no evidence to show they knew. So I'm going to separate them a little bit from this, but regardless, they were the benefactor of cheating, of blatant cheating. And how should we feel about that? That's up to you. That's up to Hutton. That's up to everyone in this studio. That's up to me to decide for yourself how you're going to ultimately feel about it. I think the thing I keep coming back to, though, Hutton, is I feel conflicted because this is a likable team. I like everything they had to say in every interview. I like Jim Harbaugh at times, even though he's goofy. I should feel good about this championship, but I don't know that I feel awful about it. I just feel conflicted. Watching all the celebrations, interviews, everything else. I don't feel conflicted when I see Jim Harbaugh say we're innocent the Tuesday morning afterward. You're not. You're not innocent of the first violations that you were suspended for, and you're not innocent. Your program is not innocent of what went on with Connor Stallions either. That's just a bold-faced lie.
Yeah, and it again, like, conflicted. I mean, the NCAA, the infractions, I mean, they're sitting back. They're not conflicted. You know, if you're not going to enforce things, then what are we doing? If you're going to kick the can down the road. I think we'll look back on this as one of the last opportunities the NCAA has to enforce some type of punishment that's not over the top, but warranted based on what's gone on. And again, I'm also including what happened at the beginning of the season with the 3-game self-imposed suspension. I'm also including the likelihood of a lawsuit, only to pull back on that as soon as more evidence came to light. And then all of a sudden, he's sitting out the final 3 games of the season. Again, all of this goes into the fact that I'm going to look at this season. Michigan's the national champion, period. NCAA can, kick this can. They can do this down the road with the pull the banner. I mean, even post game, they're saying you can't take this away from us. You can't take this banner down. The broadcast was saying that.
Yeah, and I don't know that they can, only because of the college football playoff being a separate entity from an NCAA championship, like the basketball tournament. So I don't think they can pull banners. Here's what I want to get away from, though, and this goes to basketball and everything else. The idea of vacating things, the idea of vacating wins or championships or whatever. If you're really that convinced and that mad at Michigan for what happened and you're the NCAA, if you want to show some teeth, you penalize the future of Michigan football. This has happened. As I just mentioned, everybody's going to say it was worth it. If you were a part of that ride, if you're a fan, if you're a coach, a player, whoever, you're going to say it's absolutely worth it to go 15-0 and beat Ohio State 3 straight times and win a national title and all that, Big Ten title. That was worth it. When you need to ask that tough question is 2, 3, 4 years down the road when Michigan's at a scholarship reduction, at other issues where they got postseason bans or a ban happening, and they're in the midst of a really tough time in their program, a year and a half, 2 years into that tough time, then you got to ask everyone at Michigan, boy, was that national title that none of the players in the team then, was that worth it for you? Because it's really tough right now. That's the only way to show any teeth if you're the NCAA in this. And I think that's the only thing they can do or should do. I'm tired of the vacation part of it and taking away wins or games or anything else.
Again, if that's all they can do, Chad, what's the overall lesson from this entire season?
And here's the thing. You can't penalize Jim Harbaugh because he's going to be gone for an NFL job. If they were to promote Sharon Moore or anyone on staff, you could punish them in the future. But I think if you're the NCAA, what you're punishing, you're not coming at it and saying, I'm punishing future athletes. You're punishing Michigan athletics that stood behind their guy, that offered him a contract extension, that were defiant about everything up until the time it was about to get to court, and they decided to back down and take the penalty. They were defiant the whole way through. So you're really just you're levying a penalty to Michigan football and Michigan athletics, regardless of who the players are or who the coach is at that point in time, because we all believe it's not going to be Jim Harbaugh.
Chad, there's another huge concern for college football.
Yeah, there is. Officiating. It's got to get better. I'm tired of the excuses with it, and I understand the limitations of finding good officials starting in the youth and high school ranks that everyone faces. And I take my hat off, I tip my hat to officials everywhere that sign up to do it, especially the ones that aren't doing it for a lot of money. These college football officials are making pretty good money to do it. NFL officials making good money, but that's another issue for another day. They got to get better. We got to have more consistency from game to game. And I'm not coming on here and saying, Washington lost because of officiating. Washington lost because they had to play their A game to have a chance. And they didn't. They didn't play good enough in that game. But they definitely don't have a chance when you get an ACC crew that refuses to call pass interference. If you are allowed with Michigan's physicality and their defensive backfield to get handsy and mug the opposing receiver at times, you are going to win that game against Michael Penix Jr. and that offense and the way Washington likes to play. If you're going to call a hold that is a 48-yard difference after one of the few huge plays for Washington on a very questionable holding call, a call that you could make at any point in the game when Washington's down 7 at that point, that's a game-changing play. You're going from 1st and 10, set up in Michigan territory, 25, 30 yards away from tying the game, to 2nd and 20, backed up in your own territory. That is a game-swinging type call. You better make sure it's an absolute WWE SmackDown takedown on that play. And that one wasn't. There were some legitimate holding calls that were called. And I know that Michigan had more penalties and more penalty yards than Washington in the game. It's not always about just the count of penalties and how many yards it was and which way it went. A lot of times it's what's allowed in a game. And if you're not going to call blatant pass interference on a defense, especially against Washington, that part of their whole thing is drawing pass interference penalties, you're not going to have any chance. That's not the ultimate reason Washington lost. They lost because they didn't play good enough. I think if they played their A game last night, it's a different story. It's coming right down to the wire. A one-score game either way, and maybe the Huskies win it. But, Hutton, we can't put our head in the sand and deny the fact that there's not an issue with officiating across the sport.
Yeah, and it's at the highest level of the sport.
Yeah.
SEC crews, week in and week out, so inconsistent. The NFL, they lost a handful of their head referees, the White Hats. And you see the results right now. There's a lot on their plate, though. Same thing here, but, man, it's the dumbed-down version of what I'm used to. However, I do feel like last night was more of a throwback game in many ways. I mean, you had, 200-plus yards in the first quarter running the football. You had some explosive plays by Michigan, none by Washington, defensive type game. And beyond that, tight score, low scoring. It wasn't the knockdown, drag out back and forth we saw from last year's college football playoff in the semifinals, but we didn't get that blowout either, even though Michigan's first 3 drives looked like the easy mode if you're playing college football EA Sports, which I know pissed a lot of people off too. But
I know J.J. McCarthy's going to finish 27-1 as a starting quarterback in Michigan, which is insane.
Yeah.
And he's a great winner, and he's got some athletic ability, no doubt about it. He was 10 for 19.
That's a throwback stat.
For 140 yards in the game. And they didn't need anything else out of him. I get the game plan if you're Michigan week in and week out. But I don't understand. Maybe he'll convince me otherwise. I do not understand the top 10 pick love for J.J. McCarthy.
I agree.
And there's a lot of people coming back and say, well, now Michael Penix Jr. back down to earth. This is why he's a 3rd, 4th round pick. I don't.
He's going to be ridiculed for the injuries.
I don't feel that way. It's the injuries that are the issue, and injury was a big part of last night. That guy was not near healthy, starting with the ankle and then whatever's going on with his hip or rib cage throughout the last half of the game. That was an awful interception on the first play of the second half. I will say that. I have no clue what he's doing on that one. Looked like he was trying to throw it out of bounds and fell short from just throwing it away.
But even-
I don't know what he was attempting to do on that one.
he was off. He just missed.
Yeah, he was not himself.
And you're right about McCarthy. Consider the quarterbacks that have won championships of late. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Mac Jones, Stetson Bennett. He's throwing bombs.
The thing about the games they had.
Right. And then you have J.J. McCarthy, who just won a national title, 27-1, his legacy there. He, 2 Big Ten titles. He beat Ohio State twice, adds a national championship, and he's 10 of 18 for 140 yards. That's, again, the throwback type game. They had 2 running backs that topped 100+. This first time since 2010 we've seen that in a championship game. It's.
I mean, there's a lot to like about Michigan.
They show up and they do what they do.
There's a lot to like about that team. The personalities, the fact that they all made a group decision, the guys that could have gone pro, to come back and win a national title and give it a go at that, and they accomplished it. The throwback nature of their game, how physical they are, great offensive line, great defensive line, run the football. Jim Harbaugh is a wacky character, but it's the Connor Stallion stuff and the defiance of Michigan in the face of all that it makes me conflicted about how I feel about this team and then winning a national title. I don't hate them. I don't hate it. I just feel conflicted about the whole thing.
But just to put a bow on this, college football wants you to love them. They are the face of college football.
Yeah.
The NCAA,
I love Washington.
They're not conflicted about this. I do too. I love the whole story about DeBoer and Penix and where they were, how they got back together at Washington, from first at Indiana, then Washington. I love the whole story. I can't wait to watch Will Rogers next year, by the way.
Might I add that we're talking a lot about Jim Harbaugh as NFL candidate, and he's going to be gone for an NFL job. If I was an NFL owner and I'm looking for an outside-the-box college candidate as an NFL head coach I want to talk to, Kalen DeBoer is that guy.
Yeah.
I think his offense could translate
it's
to the
everywhere
NFL
he's been.
And what they do. And yes, NAIA national champion, worked his way up, got to Fresno State, has done it now at Washington. Seems like a really good leader when I hear him talk. I mean, that to me, if I'm looking at offensive mind, offensive guy, that their style, the way they go about their business, their offensive system could work and translate in the NFL, I'm talking to Kalen DeBoer. And if you could get Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix Jr., depending on when you draft, we talked about Ryan Day with Justin Fields as a pairing. I wouldn't mind that one bit if I'm one of these NFL openings.
What's next for DeBoer is he's about to get paid again. Got an extension last year.
One way or the other.
That's right. He's paid $4.3 million. He's 44th nationally in pay. He's 7th in the Pac-12.
Crazy.
And that was with a bump last year. There's a big one coming. When you consider the average, every coach of the top 25 highest paid coaches make at least 6+. So he's going to make well beyond that. Chad, I don't know what Mike Vrabel was making with the Titans, but he was signed through 2025 with a team option for 2026. And just like last year, when A.B. Adams-Strunk, owner of the Titans, fired John Robinson after a contract extension earlier in 2023, 2022, after the 2023 season, A.B. Adams-Strunk has fired Titans head coach Mike Vrabel. We spoke on what would be the surprise firing. This is it right now. The 6th opening is in Nashville. Vrabel hits the free agent market for coaches. Not going to get traded. It's a tough process if you want to jump in and try to get your coach and start the interview process. You also have to have a coach that's going to sign off on the trade. Now, Vrabel enters the mix with Harbaugh for the most sought-after coach that's available. Meanwhile, the Titans are pointing to continuity, collaboration, and first-year general manager Rand Carthon going into now his second offseason. Comes from San Francisco, now in Nashville, and he's running the show. He's running the coaching search according to the reports, according to Schefter. So here's another opening. And Vrabel, who went to the AFC Championship game, Coach of the Year, did more with less for a while, and had back-to-back losing seasons. The Titans ownership is telling their fan base in the NFL, having a winning season isn't good enough. Losing seasons back-to-back years, fireable offense. The expectation level in Nashville is extremely high based on the results that we've seen. And the results I saw from Vrabel were pretty good. I thought that the team behind him bought into the whole identity of who he is. They played hard for him. They beat the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars down the stretch of the season where they had no business competing with those teams. And despite all that, Vrabel is fired because of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. The structure isn't something that Vrabel wanted any part of. He wanted change, and so did the ownership. And Amy Adams Strunk, in a room with two alphas, her and Vrabel, there's one that remains, and it's Amy Strunk.
If NFL media is correct on the marketplace for Mike Vrabel, he's the top option for NFL teams and not Jim Harbaugh. It's one or two. It's both those guys. I think it's either or, probably Harbaugh then Vrabel, if I had to rank them right now. But the way NFL national media discusses Mike Vrabel as a great coach, and he's 2 years removed from winning NFL Coach of the Year. Keep that in mind. With all the injuries and everything else, getting the number one seed in the AFC in the playoffs, NFL media believes this guy's going to get hired immediately by someone, that he's that coveted by NFL jobs. I'll be curious to see what the actual marketplace is. I think it's going to be pretty good, and he's going to have a job quickly. What does this say about the Titans? I want to highlight paragraph 2 of Amy Adams Strunk's statement. This is paragraph 2, section 3,
it was a lengthy one.
Subsection B, from Amy Adams Strunk in her release. Quote, as the NFL continues to innovate and evolve, I believe the teams best positioned for sustained success will be those who empower an aligned and collaborative team across all football functions. Last year, we began a shift in our approach to football leadership and made several changes to our personnel to advance that plan. As I continued to assess the state of our team, I arrived at the conclusion that the team would also benefit from the fresh approach and perspective of a new coaching staff. I think Greg Bedard had a report about some animosity about the Rand Carthon hire, that maybe he wasn't fully qualified for the job based on his actual work description and what he was doing in San Francisco.
Job performance.
There were some saying diversity hire with Rand Carthon, and that people in the Titans organization, namely Mike Vrabel, did not want him to be hired. They wanted to hire something else.
Ryan Cowden is the assumed
Ryan Cowden, the guy that they may have wanted, right? When I see position for sustained success, innovate, evolve, empower, aligned, collaborative, team effort, this sounds like corporate mumbo-jumbo jargon that you would see in a boardroom somewhere when you're trying to have different functions for how you're going to get the TPS reports done. Some of the best football factories out there, it is a dictatorship. Now, college is different from the NFL. I get that. Nick Saban doesn't have some team aligned. He's the head of that team. He's not going to everyone else and consulting on how you're going to do it. Collaboration is not part of it. Bill Belichick at his best, in the best NFL dynasty maybe ever over that 20-year period, was it a collaboration with Brady? I'm sure he asked for insight from Brady.
Oh, yeah.
Brady led the locker room, but it was Bill Belichick's show. He was GM and head coach. This is an interesting approach that you are going to default to. We are going to go with this new NFL initiative to innovate, evolve, align, collaborate, empower. And it sounds like Mike Vrabel wasn't in on that plan of what they wanted to do, and he wanted to run the show himself. I'm not saying you just go hire someone and make them a dictator. I think you show the power to become that and have more and more authority over an organization based on success, sound decision-making, all of those things based on your hires as well, which at times Mike Vrabel wasn't very good at hiring staff or knowing when to retain staff and knowing when to get rid of them.
Exactly.
So that's a big part of it too. I understand the apprehension around that. I would just caution to make that your franchise's entire mission statement of, we're going to stick to this plan of all of this, because when you find the right person, you give them that power. You empower them to make good decisions for football, and you don't rely on whatever this flow chart is of collaboration that I still don't know who the hell makes the decisions on draft picks or free agents or anything else. It sounds like a catchy way of saying a bunch of words to make sure no one gets full blame the next time it goes south.
Well, that was
the
certainly
way
this
John
year.
Robinson got the full blame
Well,
a year ago for everything, right? When they fired him
but
for that roster.
But at least Robinson was the president of the organization. Like,
Yes.
there was a hierarchy there. That was not determined whenever Rand Carthon was hired. And so I agree with you. They're buzzwords, whatever. They're corporate mumbo jumbo. But it's also what they said last year. And I think the impression is the collaborative efforts. For whatever reason, Amy Strunk wanted that whenever Robinson was fired. Vrabel wasn't doing it then because, again, Robinson was fired. And apparently he wasn't doing it now. So he's fired. So she's rolling it back out there again. And this is a behind-the-scenes, I believe, off-the-field, non-football type move. This is more mindset and tone and maybe blunt honesty, which is certainly Vrabel, and certainly Amy Adams Strunk, than it is the fact that they've won what? They won 7 games in 6 games in back-to-back years after they won 41 games the 4 previous seasons combined. They had success, but I'm curious where they turn with Rand Carthon now coming from San Francisco with a chance to completely revamp what the Titans look like. You know, they go from Derrick Henry's final game. There's no way he's coming back. This is more of a. I also read that and think they're going more pass. They're going more flash, and they're going to open the dome in 2027 with a completely revamped look than just we're going to win in the trenches week by week.
Well, I like how you phrase it, Hunting, about 2 alphas entered the arena and only one could leave, and it's the one that signs the checks.
No, the owner.
The owner is the one who's going to win out in that battle. Fascinating to me about how we got to that point between those two people. And also, Mike Vrabel's position after this season and the season before is not its strongest. So to give a little bit of defense of Amy Adams Strunk here,
right?
If you're going in and making a power play and saying, I want this or I want that. Now, if you believe in the coach and you think it's all personnel and it's not his fault and they haven't done anything to get fired, great. Then maybe you're going to hear that out a little bit more. But if you're someone who's angry about the way the last 2 seasons went and your employee comes into your office and says, now I need this, this, and this, or I'm going to go get another job somewhere else because anybody else is going to hire me, and this is what it's going to take to win here, I don't think anyone would be overly receptive to that unless you truly love that person and had no issues with them at all. So I understand Amy Adams Strunk, if that's how it went down, her response being less than positive about that with Mike Vrabel.
She doesn't want to lose, but Vrabel a week and a half ago is dropping F-bombs to the media about how he feels about losing.
Well, neither one wants to lose.
But here's the key.
I think her point is you need to see to it that you're winning.
Well,
and he's saying, I can't because of the way this structure works right now.
Well,
and I'm not going to win here based on the roster and the way it's being
structure. If you need to win, okay, how long are you going to give me to do this? Because if I come back next year, I'm fired at this time next year. Guaranteed if we just run it back the way we've been doing it, because the way we've been doing it isn't working. Like, that's the sentiment for the coach. I would also say if I'm Mike Vrabel and I don't like the direction that we're going, they're just looking at the franchise, you make a power play like this to get fired.
Yeah.
Because you control where you go. And so the question has been thrown out, well, why would he want to go to New England when they're going to be in a rebuild too? Because he's starting with his own plan, and he walks in with complete control there. He walks in and starts from year one, not going into the final year of what would be his job status in 2024 with Rand Carthon, who he's not getting along with.
Even if he's not, because I know there are a lot of reports that say he did not ask to lose his job or give an ultimatum or any of that. But if you go in there and say, this is what I want, and if your thinking is, I don't have what I need here to succeed, again, playing devil's advocate, if I'm Amy Adams Strunk in that room, I'm thinking, Mike, this is your team. This is your identity. We wanted to go out and get your guys, right? This is a team that's supposed to play in your image, and now you're telling me these guys can't win. That what you've built from a team culture, chemistry mindset that, by the way, got rid of some guys that you would think would be in line with Mike Vrabel this year also, that's not working. So how long have you been here again? And now we got to reset everything, you're going to – I can understand being negative on that.
I think that's key. Guys they got rid of, fired. They were shopping Tannehill and Henry in the offseason. I think that's all key. That's not a decision Vrabel would have made. He wouldn't be on board with that. Hopkins came in because they still had Tannehill and
Tart, there are other situations too that you would have described those guys as, and I think that was a Vrabel decision.
Oh, yeah, but if you cross him, you're gone. You're out. Davey, let's jump into NFL overreaction. We've got plenty to hit, including everyone just assumes that Vrabel's going to New England.
They do. One of the things that's still standing in the way is the fact that Bill Belichick is still the head coach there. And so we're going to start this off, but Bill Belichick will not be a head coach in the NFL next season.
I think that's an overreaction. I think he's still the head coach right now in New England. He's going about the day-to-day operations because they have to go through the process of trading him. That doesn't happen in day 2 after the season ends. He's still the head coach in New England because, well, if they're not the head coach in New England, they're not going to get anything in return for him right now. I think Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft are working with him to set up a trade and have a landing spot for Bill Belichick.
I think it's an overreaction. I think he's going to coach. I'm confused as why Josh Harris need to hire Magic Johnson and Bob Myers and all these people on this committee. Are they going to figure out how to make the trade happen?
Well, Magic Johnson's part of that ownership group.
I think that this is, but I'm talking about the actual whatever the leadership committee is he assigned. And he just hired Bob Myers. Do they have to get all of them together to figure out how to make a trade? Because he's going to end up in Washington, is my thought. This is how this is going to end for Bill Belichick, is he's going to get traded to Washington. So it's an overreaction. He will be coaching next year.
Okay, guys. Another coach, Chad, you kind of brought this up about Nick Sirianni. He might be a guy that teams are looking at, or the Eagles are looking at. And so I would say this, the Eagles, their losing streak's going to continue against the Tampa Bay Bucks coming up. They've lost 5 of their last 6.
Overreaction on that. I think they go to Tampa and win. I think they figure it out. I don't believe Tampa's very good. If they lose to this Tampa team, though, and they go out this way this season with that roster, with going for broke, surprise firing number 2 could very well be Nick Sirianni in Philly. Mike Vrabel would be 1. Nick Sirianni now would be number 2. If they lose, though, and he's not fired, he is squarely on the hot seat, as in don't get off to a great start next year, and he may get canned midseason. But I think they win against the Bucs.
I mean, I want to back them. 2 weeks ago, I'm all in on Philadelphia being a team that bounces back. They started 10-1. They've lost 5 of their last 6. And while I don't trust Baker Mayfield every single week, what evens the playing field for me is Jalen Hurts' throwing hand and A.J. Brown's knee injury. So, yes, I don't think it's an overreaction to say that the losing streak continues. I think Tampa can win. And this time, I know they don't have Tom Brady under center, but the Eagles are not the Philadelphia Eagles right now. They're a mess, and Sirianni's going to have to answer for it. He can keep his job. He's going to have to answer for it. And they fired their defensive coordinator. They've had issues with continuity, and a commitment was the word that Hurts used, 5 weeks ago. This is more than just a competition on the field against a very average team from the NFC South. And it's crazy to think that the Philadelphia Eagles are facing a team in the first round of the NFL playoffs from the NFC South, and there's a possibility. They're literally, you're thinking, well, yeah, Tampa can win that game. They should not even have any business being in this conversation.
Well, the good news is Big Dom should be able to return to the sidelines. Things have gone downhill ever since his suspension. Guys, sticking with the head coaching ranks, talked about Jim Harbaugh to start the show off, but Jim Harbaugh is coaching Los Angeles Chargers next season.
I'd like to see Big Dom as interim coach in Philly if Sirianni gets fired midway through next season. That'd be an interesting elevation of role. Not an overreaction. He's going to be in the NFL, and I'm trying to figure out the perfect spot, the landing spot for him. I think it's the Chargers, given the quarterback situation. I don't think it's an overreaction. I think this will be – he's going to have multiple options. I think L.A. with the Chargers will be the landing spot for Harbaugh.
I think it is an overreaction. I'm going to give the alternate view here. The Chargers are going to be in a bidding war with Josh Harris and the Washington Commanders. Washington, I feel like, could be a better job, believe it or not. They have an owner who absolutely is hell-bent on winning, number one. They have an owner who's going to spend money. Spanos isn't known for doing that. He's not known for spending money on coaches. They have the most cap space right now going into the offseason. They have the number 2 overall selection in the NFL draft. And the other part of this is Ron Rivera was winning 7 or 8 games, going through complete hell with what we saw there. The NFL has set up Washington to succeed. And I think they have an owner that's going to spend top dollar. If you're going to trade for Bill Belichick, he's going to be all in with Jim Harbaugh too. And, I mean, while I think the Chargers want to hire Jim Harbaugh, I think Harbaugh is intrigued and certainly wants to coach out west. He's going to make a statement by taking the job where, I mean, if he takes Washington and wins there, that's more from the status and perception of what that organization represents in the eyes of the National Football League.
And guys, finally,
and he's on the coast with his brother.
that's a good point. Finally, we will have 3 quarterbacks drafted in the first 3 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft.
I want to say this is not an overreaction, but I think it is, because you have Chicago, Washington, and New England, all 3 quarterback-needy teams. One of these teams, though, is going to make a signing in free agency. Another team, it's not Chicago, is going to have the quarterback drafted ahead of them, or a team trades up ahead of them and drafts the quarterback that they want. So Williams, May, and Jaden Daniels make sense. I think we're more likely to see one of the receivers go in the top 3. Harrison Jr. Neighbors, personally. I think we see that, even though it's set up right now 1 through 3 for QB.
Yeah, I think it's an overreaction because I'm with you, Hutton. I think one of these 3 will go sign veteran quarterback because they don't love the top quarterbacks in this draft and draft a Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go in the top 3, is what I'm saying. It's going to be 2 quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr. to one of these teams. Someone is going to trade with the Bears to draft a quarterback. Don't know which one, but they're going to move up to number 1 to draft a quarterback. And then one of the next 2 is going to draft Marvin Harrison Jr., and then we'll probably see a second quarterback in the top 3. It'll be 2 out of 3, not 3 out of 3. Final answer.
Don't rule out tackle either, because this is a league that needs offensive linemen.
Last time we had 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 was 2021, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. Not exactly something that you look back on and be like, yeah, they knocked it out of the park.
Trevor Lawrence looks like a Hall of Famer compared to those other 2 right now. He's not very good.